Okay, what I'm going to go over in this video is how to do Topcoder problems or LeetCode problems that I give you in lab. One of the unfortunate parts of Topcoder is their web servers are bad, and so whereas I used to make you have a Topcoder account and do the problems there, it's unreasonable to expect that. So instead, I give you resources so that you don't need to have Topcoder or LeetCode to do these problems. Now, in the lecture notes webpage, this is what's here. I have information on how to do that, and there are basically two workflows you use. So typically what I'll do is I will give you a URL of a write-up that you are supposed to do in lab. This will be a Topcoder problem or a LeetCode problem. Here it's LeetCode. And this is one I actually did in class. But I'm not going to go through the problem itself. I'm just going through how you should go about solving it without having to do LeetCode. Okay, so typically there'll be a link to the LeetCode problem here. There are a couple files, and I'll go over them, and then there's a header that says in case LeetCode or Topcoder servers are down. This is where I give a precise specification of the problem. So this specification is equivalent to Topcoder or LeetCoders, but it's not copied. It's my own words, but it gives you enough information to do this problem. Okay, so you need to read through that and figure out what the problem is. Then, so there are two workflows I use. Here is the easier one. Okay, I typically give you a single CPP file called skeletons.cpp. Okay, here it is, and what it has is this is the class definition of the solution that you need to write that matches the problem spec. I give you a skeleton of that method solving it, usually returning 0 or something that's wrong, but the nice thing is it compiles. And then I give you a main that either has examples built into it or it lets you enter examples on the command line or on standard input. Here, it's on standard input. Okay, so typically what you do is either save that or you can just copy paste it. So here I'm in a fresh directory. I'll copy and paste this into skeleton.cpp. There you go. Okay. You'll note this program compiles. Okay, so I've got an A dot out there. And now if I have examples in my Topcoder write-up like I do here, okay, so here's for one example. Of course, I'm going over the skeleton program there. Okay, it returns 0. Now, down here, well, I have here where you actually have answers, right? This is what your answer is supposed to be 6, 9, and 0. Obviously, all these compile and run, but they return 0. Now, what you're supposed to do is solve the problem, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy the solution. Sorry. There you go. I've now solved the problem, and so when I compile it, now you'll notice it actually gives the right answers. Okay, so I have the solution there. Now, if I want to test it without using LeetCode, now what I typically do is I will give you here in the write-up a testing script and an answers problem. What you should do is go ahead and save those. So here, let's, can we download? Oh, downloaded it for me. Okay. Nice. So that will be in my downloads directory. Okay, so now I have that here. I'll do the same thing with this answers file. Can I download that? Go link save, link as copy. Nope. All right, I'll just copy paste that one. So copy and then into answers.txt, answers.txt. Go ahead and copy paste that one. Okay. And now what happens is this is a test.shell is a test script that you run. It's self-contained. It doesn't point to any of my files. Okay. Gives you some answers. And now what you do is you're going to put that into your own temporary file. And now this should match answers.txt. So diff temp.txt and answers.txt. It should have none. Okay, you'll notice on my web write-up I put the MD5 hash here in the write-up. So SSL MD5 that You'll note that hash matches. And you'll note if I do the same thing to temp.txt, it should match, because if the files are identical, they'll have the same hash. One of the reasons I have this is that if the TAs are going to check your answer, this hash has to match, because you got to make sure you didn't just change the answers.txt file to match your own. Has to match the hash. Okay, now if you wanted to submit this to LeetCode, you'd actually have to strip out the class definition and put that into LeetCode, which is fun. It's always fun to test your code against LeetCode, but that's how that works. Okay, that's workflow 1. Here's workflow 2. Okay, so workflow 2, an example of what you do is you're given 2 files. Actually, this is misnamed. It'll be your class name. I'll fix that in the lab right up, or in the lecture notes right up. So there's going to be a name of a solution file and a file called main.cpp, and you're going to compile them both with main.cpp. Now that's confusing, so let me just give you the example. So the example here is this cryptography problem. Again, I'm not going to go through the solution of this problem, just how you go about it. So here, let's get rid of everything we have in this directory. Again, you got a problem statement linked to Topcoder if you want. However, I've got a precise specification here that you can read. Okay, and then I have 2 programs here. First is it's called cryptography.cpp. Sorry. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is main. Oh yeah, it's main. This is main.cpp. So I'll go ahead and copy paste that into main.cpp. Okay. And then I have a file called, I have a skeleton file. This one is actually called cryptography.cpp. It's the name of the class. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that. Okay, now you'll note this, much like the previous one, has my solution prototype that they give you in the problem write-up and a skeleton answer that's wrong, but the nice thing is it compiles. Okay? Now the way you do this is you compile main.cpp. Right? The reason that works is because I include cryptography.cpp above. Now this is bad programming practice, so please don't do this or say that I told you to do this. It works really well for Topcoder and Leetcode, which is why I do it, but it's not good practice to include a CPP file in another CPP file. However, that's why it compiles. Now, in here are the examples. If I type a.out, it'll say, here, give it a number or give it dash, and it'll read from standard input. So if I say, sorry, I know I have dot in my path. That's why I can say a.out. So if I say a.out 0, okay, well, it's returning 0. Let's go in and print out what's going on. So here, do it here. For I equals 0, I is less than numbers, dot size, I plus, C out, numbers, I, and L. Okay. Right, you'll notice I changed cryptography, but I'm recompiling main, because main includes cryptography. And now if I say a.out 0, you can see there are the inputs, right? There are the inputs. There are the inputs. I can enter inputs myself, echo 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 into a.out hyphen. There they are. That final 0 is the final print statement of printing out the answer. That's why there's that final 0 in all of these, right? Because my answer just returns 0. Okay, now suppose I solve the problem, which again, I'll do that offline. There, I've just solved the problem. Okay, now if I do a.out 0, I get the correct answer. All right, here we go. 1, 2. Okay. Now if I want to test myself, obviously I can test it on Topcoder. And the nice thing about testing this on Topcoder is now I can just test this file. I can just put this file on Topcoder or LeetCode and it works. So I don't have to strip it out. That's why I have this workflow. However, what you can do again is I have this testing shell, this testing program, which I download. Here, there's an answer file. I wish I could download that. Is that going to work? There you go, that worked. that here. Okay, and now when I run the program, so, right, that gives me a bunch of test cases. So I can do that in attempt.txt, and now I can do the same diff again. Right, since they don't differ, it's all good. And again, I got MD5 hashes there to make sure that if I give this in lab that people aren't changing things. Okay, so that's the workflow. Now, again, you have to have compiled it. The testing script is super simple. It just runs the program a bunch, which means if you don't have your a.out file and you try to run test.shell, it's going to yell at you. Right, so you're going to need to compile main.cpp. What are other issues you could have? Let's say you named the file wrong. So we called it cryptography.cpp. Okay. Right, so now I've got an error because main's trying to find cryptography.cpp, and that's the file that was misspelled. Right, so here, move that. Now it compiles, runs just fine. Okay, so this is how I expect you to program in lab. And now, whether or not you're working on a Windows laptop, or you're working on the Hydra machines, or working on your Mac like this, or your Linux laptop, all of these workflows should work identically. Okay, and it's best to go ahead and do it in a shell, in a Unix shell, just like I have. Okay, and if you're using an IDE, I guess you figure out how to use an IDE. If you're SSHing in, that should be fine, right? If you're SSHing in, then when you save these files, it'll save them onto a local machine, so you'll have to move them over, right? But hopefully you can figure all of that out. Okay, I hope that helps you out. Bye.